we should be live streaming. There we go. And now we'll admit the participants. Hello, anyone joining us on live stream. We're just going to get situated here on Zoom, and then we will dive right in. Welcome to folks joining us on Zoom. Heads up, because we're live streaming, we're going to have only the panelists on video. So attendees, better to stay off video so that you're not on YouTube unintentionally. We'll just have the panelists on video and other folks can be on audio. Okay. Welcome, folks. Welcome to our panel. We'll get started in just a moment. We're just letting folks into the Zoom here. And just as a reminder, we'll have only panelists on video since we're live streaming, unless you want to be on the YouTube live stream. But given that I don't know all of you and don't have your consents to put you on YouTube, better to have just our panelists on video. All right, so let's dive in. Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tori. I'm hosting this panel on the PhD skills that are marketable. We're going to dive into what marketable skills PhDs have with our panelists here who have worked outside of academia. And hopefully today you walk away with some inspiration and ideation around ways that you can market your PhD experience in a career outside of academia. So the hope for today is that we each come away from that panel with new ideas and new inspiration. To get us kicked off, I'd love to hear from attendees via chat how many jobs you've applied for at this point. Could be 0, could be 100, whatever it is, just drop into chat how many jobs you've applied for so far. 0, 10, 30, way too many. Okay, so we've got variation here from 0 to way too many. Helps panelists and I get to know folks here a little bit. 0, nice. Okay, so panelists, we've got folks who are mid-application, who maybe haven't started applying yet. Good variance to work with. Okay, and so the way that things are going to run today, I'm going to start off by introducing our panel, and then I'll ask them some questions that I've prepared. Attendees, I'm going to ask that you drop your questions into chat. You can do that throughout the panel, and I'll go through and source questions from the chat. Though heads up, given the number of folks attending, we may not be able to get to everyone's question. We will post ways to follow up with panelists at the end of the panel so that if your question doesn't get answered, you have forums to connect after today. Final heads up I'll give before we dive in. Panelists are speaking on behalf of themselves rather than on behalf of their organizations. All right, so let's introduce the panel. I'll introduce myself first. As I mentioned, if you don't know me, I'm Tori Waber. I'm a PhD. I did my PhD in human evolutionary biology at Harvard back in 2012. I then worked in the tech industry for 7 years at Facebook and Google before starting my own business in 2020. I now work to empower PhDs to find careers outside of academia because there are so many options available for them. And my hope is to empower folks to see those options available for themselves. So we will start off with Aditya Mahara. He completed his PhD in biomedical engineering at Dartmouth and is currently a senior product manager at Marketable. Welcome, Aditya.
Thanks, Tori. Good to be here.
A few quick questions so our attendees can get to know you. How many years post-PhD are you?
7.
7. Okay, so you've had some time to get some perspective on industry. And out of curiosity, how many meetings do you have scheduled today?
I have about 6. I think there's another 7th ongoing right now, which I'm not part of.
Oh, no. Okay. We interfered with your calendar a little today. Thank you for making time. And then critical question, do you prefer a sunny day or a cloudy day?
Sunny day all the time.
There we go. Nice. All right. Sun all the time. Well, good to have you here. Thank you for being part of our panel.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Ender Reichart completed their PhD in anthropology at the University of Chicago. They're currently a staff UX researcher and manager at Google. Welcome, Ender.
Thank you for having me here.
How many years post-PhD are you, Ender?
I have to do a little bit of math. I graduated in 2015, so getting pretty close to 10 years. Yeah.
Nice. That's some time. And I'm curious here in UX, roughly how many statistical tests have you done this year?
Well, fortunately, I have some great quantitative UX research partners that I work with and data scientists that I also work with. So I myself don't do the statistical analysis, but help with the overarching qualitative objectives. Yeah.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, we can get a window on qualitative UX research today. And then critical important question, Mac or PC?
You know what? I do both. So yeah, I'm dual wielding.
That's wild. Many folks prefer one or the other. So you're conversant in both. That's awesome.
Yeah, ambidextrous when it comes to OS systems, I guess.
That's awesome. Well, welcome. Happy to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
Matteo Tardelli completed his PhD in immunology and metabolism at the Medical University of Vienna. He's currently a career development and life science consultant. Welcome, Matteo.
Thanks for having me.
How many years post-PhD are you, Matteo?
It's been 7 as well.
7. Oh, interesting. We unintentionally got my time window here. And I'm curious, Matteo, how many emails are in your inbox right now?
What do you mean, unread or in total?
Either.
In total, yeah, 8,000, 9,000.
So not part of the inbox zero school. Nice.
Right.
And I'm curious, coffee or tea?
Definitely coffee, espresso, please. Yeah.
There we go. I like it. That's key. We could have a whole nother panel on amazing espresso, but that's not our topic for today. So. Well, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And Olivia Marisi completed her PhD in linguistics at the University of Colorado Boulder. She's currently a senior conversational designer at Quick. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How many years post-PhD are you, Olivia?
I'm the exception to the group today. I'm not even one. I officially filed last August.
Woo! All right, fresh PhD. Nice. Let's talk about the experiences you've had recently. Awesome. And I'm curious, Olivia, how many colleagues do you have on your working team at work?
5, who I work the most closely with day to day.
Nice, seems reasonable. Critical question here, cats or dogs?
That is easy. Dogs for sure. I have one sleeping at my feet right now.
Nice. I also have a dog who may bark in appearance during our panel today. So for the dog people, they will laugh. For the cat people, they may be infuriated. We'll see. Well, welcome, Olivia. Happy to have you here on the panel.
Thank you.
So now that you've gotten to know our panelists a little bit, we're going to dive into this topic on PhD's marketable skills. I find that for folks attending these panels, it's often helpful to hear about folks' initial journey out of academia. So Olivia, I might start with you here, just since this is recent. How did you make that choice to leave academia and move to where you are now?
Yeah, so it was sort of an ongoing decision that I came to starting about the 3rd year of my PhD. I started assuming I love to research, I love to teach, so faculty position made sense. I didn't know of any other options. And it started, once I started getting to know other options, I got a couple of internships, really enjoyed the tech industry. I really liked working on a team with multiple people. I liked projects moving a little bit faster than they did in academia, but it wasn't for those folks, if you're trying to make that decision. For me, it was not like a black and white, one day I decided completely. It was an ongoing testing things out, trying things out. And for me, a really big part of the decision factor is autonomy and choice in where I wanted to live, as well as interest in trying new things and doing different things. And that's what really solidified the choice. And that's when I told my committee, I'm not planning on going on the market. I'm going to make this official. I've done a few internships, so it's like, I'm going to do this official shift once I'm done. And that's a whole other topic for discussion too. But yeah, it was an ongoing thought process. And then I think I probably finalized the decision about in my 4th year, after about 1.5 years of exploring and a couple of different part-time and internship roles.
So I hear locational flexibility. I hear
Yes.
freedom to do the work you want to do. Those themes resonate with anyone else on the panel in terms of your leaving academia journey?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Choosing where you live, crazy, what an idea. And so I'm curious then, on this topic of skills, how closely, folks, does your current work match what you were doing during your PhD? Go for it, Ender.
Oh, sure. So I would say that there has been a number of exercises in translating my expertise from my PhD, which I had a focus on science and technology, incorporations of assistive living technologies to facilitate engagement with living environments and lifestyles for the elderly in Japan. That topic is not a topic that I work with, but a number of the themes that emerge from that work remain relevant when I engage with problems. So when I say problems, like research questions in the product spaces that I engage with. So I constantly and still engage with a lot of the kind of educational frameworks and like theoretical heuristics that I worked with as an academic in my day-to-day work as a UX researcher.
And so I'm curious there, Ender, just to pause on that for a moment, the sort of frameworks, heuristics, you know, what pieces of that translated versus not, right? It sounds like the Japan elderly population may not have been as relevant as you moved into the tech industry. What are the pieces that transferred easily?
Oh, certainly the analytical aspect. So it's interesting, there isn't that much in terms of publications in the user experience space on the importance of doing analysis on the data, qualitative analysis on the data that you've collected through, you know, whether that be ethnographic, interview, fieldwork, etc. And I find that an interesting gap because a lot of my education in anthropology has been how to kind of level up the day-to-day observations, patterns, beliefs, conversations that you're embroiled in, and understand that those common threads from certain philosophical or social theoretical lens. And while you're not trying to make broad claims about how Foucault or Marxian value systems apply, you are still engaging in exercises of association, abstraction, and so that mental gymnastics that you learned in academics is still applicable in your practice as a researcher.
Nice. So almost that way of thinking, that approach, that methodology scales, even if it's not, you know, investigating Foucault. And thank you for bringing Foucault up to my brain. It's been a minute since I thought about Foucault. So.
Yeah, I've been revisiting him lately.
There you go. Room to continue that, even with new hair. Thanks. Other folks, curious how your skills translate. Aditya, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So just as background, my PhD was primarily in like engineering in the medical device space. And today, and since then, my industry has also been healthcare and technology. So there's that overlap. But in terms of what transferred from my academic training to my role throughout the years, I think of it in three different dimensions. One is knowledge, one is skills, like you mentioned, and the other is mindset. So in terms of knowledge, unfortunately, very low amount of things translated because what I was doing was so niche, so specific that not a lot of opportunities in that very sub-specific niche. So knowledge, unfortunately, didn't translate as much. Skills translated to a few different ones. The biggest one I could imagine is this idea of being experimental skills or like testing skills. I'm a product manager today, and there's surprisingly a lot of overlap because you're trying out alpha beta testing, or you're trying out different things, and you gather data, you look at the hypothesis, it's true or false, and you make product decisions. I would have never thought that when I was in academia, that a kind of experimental approach, when I'm running a lot of experiments in my PhD, would translate to making software products now. So that skill set of being experimental has translated. And in terms of the mindset, it's also very similar of just wanting to learn and dig more. Like that kind of has translated into the very dynamic job market today, because all of a sudden ChatGPT can do a lot, right? So you want to keep learning and growing, and that kind of mindset of learning does translate well into industry.
Nice. So I hear mindsets, approaches, maybe topic is the piece that folks move furthest away from. And I want to highlight that sort of experimental thinking approach. Show of hands, panelists, how many of you have encountered an industry collaborator who doesn't have that approach, right? So when you've worked with someone, you've almost been surprised by like, whoa, they don't seem to get this like hypothesis-driven thinking. So, and I saw your hand go up, right? Yeah. I think I was surprised as a PhD encountering folks where I'm like, whoa, that is something my PhD has trained me in that other folks might not have. I don't know if that resonates at ETF. You've seen that with folks who you've worked with, where that brings that value add with that hypothesis testing approach.
Yes, it's mixed bag. Some are really into it, some are not. And surprisingly, the core fundamentals of software development happens to be very hypothesis based. I mean, Facebook, you've been in the whole industry. So you've seen probably applications being released and tested every second, every minute. So there's so much at like that level going on that I see folks who are embedded in that process really into it, and some just don't care or don't know.
Yeah, Facebook's running tests pretty frequently. Well, Matteo, I'm curious about consulting. Tell us more about what that looks like and how your PhD skills translate or don't.
Sure. I think the mindset side of things is really relatable. So, really these hypothesis testing and things like that. And really these, kind of you're always willing and interested to learn new things. It's super interesting, and it's super transferable also to other, kind of buckets and different jobs as well. But also, like I like to step back a little bit, because I transitioned to industry already twice in my career. So I've been in biotech first as a senior scientist. So after my PhD at Cornell, I decided to transition to industry. And the first job I got, it felt like a natural transition from bench to bench. So still doing bench work, but in biotech. And after that, the second transition was a little bit more interesting, because it was a bigger leap of faith, because from biotech, then I decided to go into consulting. And I think, generally speaking, skills that that really translatable from my PhD experience are surely the project management side of things. Of course, yeah, you manage a project during your PhD studies, while as a project manager and consultant, you have to manage many. So it's pretty different, but then with time, we really kind of understand how to prioritize tasks and things like that. And so that was also like something that, that came from my PhD as well. And, this just kind of adaptability as well. If, you know what I mean, in terms of, of course, we move around so much as well as PhDs, right? I was doing my PhD in Vienna, then my first postdoc in Vienna, then New York City, and before I was in London. So you move a lot around, and you change labs, you change colleagues. So you're really adaptable to different environments and things like that. So I think that was really a skill that it was actually extremely important also in consulting. But in regards to my background, I will say, I use quite a bit of my background also in that, a little bit less than in the biotech job, so to say. But I think, most of the skills I really learned throughout my PhD journey are really applicable. Yeah.
I would say, can I bring up one? I totally second, third, what everyone is saying about analytical skills translating really well, 100%, there's more of that. But one skill, this is my first full-time role in industry post PhD as well. So it's from that perspective. But one skill I've been pleasantly surprised how well it's translated is I taught during my PhD as well as sometimes a research assistant, but I taught quite a bit. And I've been really pleasantly surprised how much I've drawn from my teaching skills and how helpful that is, particularly I can talk to, I work with LLMs and ChatGPT and all these things. I can talk to my technical team about all the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty. But then if I'm going on a sales call with our sales team, I'm going to talk about it. They like having an expert on those calls. I can talk about it in a completely different way. So it reminds me a lot of like the differences between giving a conference presentation to your field versus the way I would talk about concepts to an intro class that I was teaching. And it's, I think, a unique skill set to be able to explain things in ways that people will understand and make things accessible to various folks and various different audiences. And I've been really pleasantly surprised from the teaching aspect how much that has translated.
Plus one, there are so many folks who wonder how or whether teaching translates. Out of curiosity, Olivia, if you were going to use, industry jargon to describe those teaching skills, what might you say in the areas you just talked about?
So that's such a good point because, when I was interviewing for roles and they asked what skills I had, I did not say, well, I taught for 4 years and ended at that, right? You have to explain why that's a useful skill and put it in the language that they're going to understand in that, and to make you smile too, in that community practice as well. So when I would talk about that, like on interviews or how I talk about the industry and say that, I can speak to technical teams on the nitty gritty of the product, and I can work with our PMs to lay out a roadmap and to develop an implementation plan. And I also love speaking to our clients, working with the sales team to develop an accessible, deck or materials to talk about how we're going to serve their needs as a company with our solutions.
Yeah, I would jump in there and say so much of what I have invested in as I made that transition from academic to industry has been, how do you translate your skills and your historical knowledge and expertise to a completely new and honestly different culture, value culture. And so it wasn't like I got it right, even if I got the job, but like over time, I have learned how to do it more effectively and efficiently. But yeah, like our business academia to UX is like trying to encapsulate all of that hard work in like an easy to access way, but it's brutal because they don't teach it to you in academia. Yeah.
I'd love to maybe add on to that as well from my experience. And I think what Olivia said is really resonating with me about this whole skill of translating complex ideas into very simple terms. And that could be in written form, visuals, like when we're writing papers, we do all of this, you make a figure. That has been really useful 7 years later when I'm trying to explain to engineers what the product should be doing, etc. So just this skill set of simplifying complex ideas into a figure or like a concise page document or whatever form that may be, that's very transferable.
Absolutely. And skills that PhDs may take for granted that they have, right? It is not easy to take something complex, communicate it to specialists, and communicate it to non-specialists. That conversation is important. I want to check in on one comment in the chat, one question in the chat, and folks, feel free to keep dropping questions in the chat if you would like, about this potential guilt of leaving academia behind, right? There is sort of that tribal thinking, and Ender, you were mentioning the cultural differences that exist between academia and industry. There can be some guilt or difficulty in leaving. Anyone on the panel encounter that and want to speak to how you wrangled with it?
I can. I raised my hand. I don't know if that function works the same again. Yeah, so it's something that I dwelt with for a long time. I think to some extent, the university that I emerged from was very much academics to make academics, and I'm very proud of their graduates that have gone on to tenure track professorships at top universities. I had no knowledge or awareness that there was another path or other multiple paths, and was afraid to look into them because I regarded that as, why would you admit failure by taking a different track? And so it wasn't until the end of my graduate process that I realized the lifestyle of an academic is not conducive with my, I don't know, constitution. And I didn't like going to bed feeling like I should have done more. And I didn't like waking up and feeling anxiety about starting the day and all of the things that I needed to do. And having no break between work and life because it spilled over everywhere all the time. And also I found my partner, and I wanted to settle down and have some of those things that people like to have, like a home and children and a cat, not a dog. I don't like dogs. Sorry, Olivia. Just kidding. So yeah, I ended up going that direction, and I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but they haven't like updated my status in their registry of like graduates or where they are beyond my postdoc. And I don't know, I've had a lot of like graduates from my program reach out to me and ask for direction on like, how do I do this? Like how do you enjoy it? Like, what is your experience? And it's like slowly more and more like awakening to opportunities outside of professorships. You know?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe add on to that with, by the way, I wanted to say that my advisor fortunately was very supportive, which normally may not happen in all cases. So I was very lucky in that regard to, explore external opportunities, etc. But I also think there is something to the incentives alignment within an academic institution, right? There's like the normal way things happen is incentivized for research and teaching, and those fall within the academic boundaries. And I've also noticed that career opportunities and like kind of like postgraduate planning and training, maybe sometimes there's career services, but most of the times like people are kind of on their own. And that's why people like Tori are like excellent, because you have this gap in the market that you're addressing. And same story with me, like you mentioned, where a lot of past graduate students or even current graduate students are seeking advice. And that kind of is just indicative of that kind of pull that academia has in many ways. So yeah, it's a complex topic. There's some gravitational pull there. Difficult to kind of really put a finger on it, but it does exist.
So if I can, piggyback on one thing too, thinking of the academy as a culture, as its own community of practice was a big help in my mindset shift to be able to start to analyze a little bit more, like, is this what I want? Does this align with my values and my goals in life, rather than viewing it as this, center of the universe that I was in. It's a workplace, it's a culture, it's an institution as much as anything else. And that helped give me a little bit of distance to make that decision. But at the end of the day, whether you're lucky enough to have an advisor who's supportive of your transition, or they don't understand it, or they're actively not supportive, or if your peers in your program don't understand what you're doing, at the end of the day, it is your life. We only have one life, as far as I know, and you have to make choices that align with what you want out of this life. It's so easy to get wrapped up in a million and one should do's of academia, and you can spend an entire life following the list of what you should be doing on that path and giving yourself that's pros for cats 7. So giving yourself some space to assess if that's what you want is really important to do, because no matter, everyone's going to have an opinion on what you do either way, whatever kind of job you take or don't take. So you have to make that decision for yourself, because at the end of the day, you're the one, it's your time, it's your life, you're the one who's spending the time and the energy and the effort on it.
Well, and thanks, folks, for sharing your experiences there, right? Too often we talk about these hows of how you get the job, right? The how to market your skills, and we'll dive back into that. But the tough part of it, right? The gravitational pull, as you were saying in DTI, I think of it almost as a dogmatic one. That's, something you're navigating with as well. And so, like Olivia said, you have your choices to make in your life, and they're yours to make. So let's talk about those choices. There's a question in the chat about how you chose to pursue your current role or field. Maybe if folks would talk a little bit about how you explored and how you settled on where you are now.
I can go first. I don't want to hog the screen, but I can start. So for me, it started off with the field of research I was in, which was medical devices. So I transitioned from research to a medical device company, and that's kind of how my transition happened. And my role changed from throughout the years, and finally found product management, which I always wanted to do, but didn't know that it existed as a role. Like I knew I liked business, technical, and design. I just didn't know that there was a role called product management for it. So it took me a couple of years to get there. But yeah, the transition for me was just a pivot in industry, just a pivot in within the domain, within just an industry context. But now, having said that, if I look back, I'm actually doing this exercise where I'm mapping out like a whole map of 7 different industries and about 10 roles in each industry. I'm beginning to see there's like 100 roles, 10 industries that any PhD could apply. and this is turning into a big spider web at the moment, but I wish I hadn't known that previously, because that's one of the first questions some of the people who reach out ask me is like, hey, what are my options? And that's a difficult question to answer. But there's a lot, hundreds of different roles.
Yeah, I find it's a quick flip from there's nothing else I could do. Whoa, there are too many other things I could do. How do I navigate that? Right? And that latter piece can be challenging in and of itself.
Yeah, it's like opening up a positive Pandora's box. I was going to say, so I kind of just looked around for like using, for example, like LinkedIn and Indeed and like searches, entering into that skills that I would claim to have. So ethnography, for example, qualitative analysis, and looked for what job results were coming back as listing those skills. And through that, I found user experience research as an option available that matched a lot of my expertise and like academic experience that I could. And again, this gets back to the translation work that Olivia and Aditya, we talked about, but having to then learn to speak in their language so that they could see and understand that I had that, close to 10 years of experience as a qualitative researcher. And once you get it, like, and you're in, and it's only easier from there.
I'm curious, Matteo, we're speaking about many of these things here from the US labor market, that sort of translation, that exploring for jobs on LinkedIn. Do you see those same sort of phenomena happening in Europe? Is there anything different about job searching in the European market that doesn't stick with what you're hearing?
I actually work for a US-based company, but well, so yeah, that applies to that, I guess, as well. Yeah, I think in Europe it's a little bit different in regards to different markets in terms of, yeah, it's a little bit more complex, like languages and things like that. And yeah, it feels like the market is a little bit more chaotic in general. It sounds like, yeah, there's different salaries, different kind of also industries. So I think within the US, it's a little bit easier to understand, these different industries somehow to some extent, I think, or at least that was my perception. Yes, as the panelists were saying, like these transferable skills, such as the communication side of things, as well as communicating to different audiences, are really like important in consulting as well. That is something that I was, I'm using quite a lot. But I think that's why I was kind of quiet before, because I feel like instead I was not able to really develop these skills in academia that much. So I was able, of course, to kind of present at a conference and, to different peers and professors, my PI, etc. But I was never exposed to really talking like non-technical to someone. And I think that was something that I was missing. And that is something that, I'm fulfilling right now, getting to like talk to other people, other stakeholders, such as that guy in marketing, that guy in business development that doesn't understand the world of science. So I think that's really cool. And it's something that, at least in my experience, and yeah, I had quite a bit of a long academic career. It's been like 9 years. I didn't really develop so much. And I think it was something that I was missing, like really getting like the bigger picture about things and trying to explain complex, data and complex concepts to a wider audience. Yeah.
And so what I would put there is that PhDs have skills. They don't have all the skills, right? You have more skills than you believe, and you have more to learn.
That's
right. Yeah, you tell me.
Yeah, at least in my experience, that was the case. Also, yeah, as I was mentioning before, the project management side of things, it was a disaster at the beginning. Really, trying to understand, and you get like during, at least in my experience, I was probably kind of responsible for one project, maybe two, in collaboration with someone else, and with these very relaxed deadlines. So you're like, okay, well, I need to do these experiments within the next 6 months, cool. But then when you get to consulting, and then you have to present to a client in 2 weeks' time, and you're starting the analysis today, you're like, and then you receive it at the same time, like 1,000 emails about another project. So it's a little bit, I guess, different than in academia. Or at least it was for me. So I really had to really learn the hard way.
I wanted to bring up too, because I saw a few questions in the chat about, this tech market, hiring market in particular, which we all know has been a little volatile. For reassurance for folks, I was on the market this last fall. I should say on the market, that's academic speak, but I was looking for an industry role this fall, and I got multiple very strong offers. So even in this, this hiring arena, it's very possible. But one thing we all know about, there's plenty of work to be done in translating your CV to a resume and explaining what you've done on that front. For folks interested in the UX or the design side of things, for me, having a strong portfolio was really, really key. I got so much more comments on my portfolio, interest in my portfolio than really anything on my resume. And if that's something that is relevant to jobs that you're interested in applying for, your portfolio is a place where you can show your research process, your design thinking, your unique perspective on things. And it just gives you more space than a one-page resume. So I won't take a bunch of time on that because it might not be relevant for everyone's jobs that they're interested in. But that's a really big thing to be able to have a little bit more space to explain all of your research processing and the way that you work in that type of artifact. Yes, I'm sure you talk about that a lot. So I wanted to flag it because I got a lot of interest in my portfolio from a lot of people this fall. And that was really key for me.
I did want to also to kind of jump on and maybe provide a little bit of a negative lens around the current academic environment, or sorry, job search landscape, given the kind of downfall of the big tech industry. I think it has gotten harder. There's fewer jobs, and I think the ones that you're seeing get posted, there's a lot of ambiguity around whether or not they are longer term positions, or if they're kind of a bet, like, is this cryptocurrency that could go bankrupt in 6 months and then I'm out of a job again. One of the suggestions that I would make is to go the route of working with an agency for job searching. So there are a number of job agencies that work to find you a good fit with a company. So they recruit like a pool of potential applicants and have a direct pipeline to a lot of these companies that aim to hire either for contract positions, which are temporary, that can become full-time roles. But regardless, it gets you over that initial skepticism that all industries have about academics, that you won't be able to work in the busy, fast-paced, frenetic environment of the industry, of a corporate culture, which isn't true. It's just, it is like an adjustment, and you do have to collaborate more. So once you get through that year, you're basically golden.
I think what I'd like to add one more point, because have been thinking about the current market, about tech, and I think sometimes it's important to zoom out and look at the industry on a more longer time span. So for those who are looking for a job immediately, this doesn't apply to you, unfortunately. But this might be the time to upskill, because there's so many predictions that in the next decade, the advancement in the next century will be made in tech, right? So the tech industry will continue to expand, but I'm talking more longer term. It will continue to have numerous different roles. There will be a whole subfield of prompt engineering coming up very soon. So this is the time to upskill if you do not immediately need a job. And tech remains one of the biggest kind of industries that will exponentially grow in the next decade. So just to keep that in mind as well.
But if you have the space now, and you're not graduating yet, if you can find an internship, some contract work, some part-time work, anything like that is going to make, because I think Andrew's right, it's gotten a little bit more tight because there's more folks applying for fewer positions currently. Anything you can do before you graduate to have some of that experience on your resume will go a long way, because it essentially says that you've been sort of pre-vetted by another company a little bit. So they're not taking as big of a gamble on you as an academic. I did this for X company, I did this for Y company, or I did it in a consulting capacity, or what have you. And I'll also say, I did 2 internships in tech space during my PhD, and I did not ask for permission. I decided I'd ask for forgiveness later. And I, like my first one, I was working on, comprehensive exams. I went to my internship from 8 to 5 to 6. I ate food because they fed us there, which was amazing. And then I came home and I worked on my research from 7 to 10 every night. So I could hit all the deadlines that my advisor needed me to hit, and then I wanted to hit for the PhD as well. So even if your program doesn't have a specific, like, okay, go do an internship during, after your 3rd year, what have you, most don't. I don't know if it has something like that. Very rare. So don't feel like you have to wait for permission from your department to do something like that. That's what you want to pursue. Do it and figure out how to make all the other parts and pieces fit as you go.
Well, it's so interesting. This is part of the reason I really enjoy doing these panels. This is an area where I disagree with panelists. I'm like, okay, you don't have to have an internship. You don't have to have an agency, right? And those help. They help show your credibility. They help close the gap when a hiring manager is looking at your resume and saying, wait, they're way over there. If you have an internship, you get closer. If you have an agency vouching for you, you get closer. But you can also do that via networking and storytelling. At least from what I see, being able to connect with folks and help bridge the gap with just your marketing on your resume. It's possible. It works amidst these other techniques. Feel free to disagree with me there, panelists. That's the perspective I take, but you tell me if that sounds like nonsense.
I don't think it's nonsense, but I think it is harder and less likely. I think that's what it comes down to, is if you find yourself, I saw the number of applications people put in. I did 10 a day when I first was looking for UX research jobs. I applied to 10 jobs every day, and it was a huge effort. And of those 10, one of them I invested massaging my resume to make it look exactly like keywords with the job description, and messed around with making sure the top things on my bullets were matching what they said they were looking for, and wrote a cover letter for them. But the other 9 were kind of just I'm going to throw myself into this pool of applicants and maybe I'll come up in the search. And had I been an intern, I met people that were interns after I joined the private sector, and they came in sometimes more senior to me because they'd already proven through the internship that they could apply their PhD, whereas I had not. And so I entered in at a lower level, a lower pay grade, because I hadn't done that proof or given that evidence, and they can just kind of jump in. So I think that there's things to be said about the lighter load of going the route of an agency if you're just going to get that proof, and then you can land your big bucks job.
I will second. It's not a requirement by any means, but it can make that lift a little bit easier, I think. The job ad that I am for this job that I accepted, it was not for a senior role. And they gave me the senior title when I accepted, because that's where they saw me as well. So it's not impossible to do without internships by any means. Don't let that discount yourself, but that's just if you can do it, I would recommend it.
There's also an avenue for targeting future roles in a specific company through internships. So I think that's another avenue where Google has a specific internship program for PhDs. McKinsey has an advanced degree internship, and a lot of cases I've seen where they pivot to those companies long-term after their defense of their thesis. So, another way to do it ultimately. But yeah, I think either way will work. It's not one way or the other, whatever works for the folks.
Well, and it's interesting because our theme today is marketable skills, but we're almost talking about how behind the marketing, the language, the terms, et cetera, there's also the, network, the credibility, these other things that go into bridging that gap, right? To basically saying, okay, this person with this other experience can do this role. And so not discounting those other pieces, not thinking it's all about your wording, but knowing that these other pieces, your network, your internship experience, agencies, et cetera, those also help market, right? It's like someone who publishes a book and goes out and hires a PR firm. They don't sell the book themselves, they hire the PR firm to do that. You can leverage these other resources to market as well. Does that sound fair? It's interesting. I'm distilling this topic as we're talking about it. So I see a few themes in the chat. One about how to distill the broad array of roles and figure out one that fits for you. Another about this sort of what are hiring managers looking for and how do you apply knowing you may only meet 50% of job requirements. Either of those stick out for folks? Folks want to speak to either of those? I framed 2 questions, but pick which one feels more interesting.
I think the role subject is very interesting. I think like also when I was transitioning outside of academia, I really didn't understand anything about roles and things out there, to be honest. You will going through these applications like with these CMC scientists or these upstream, downstream thingy scientists, and you're like, okay, well, apply to that, but I don't really know what's the job is like. So I think it's really important at some point throughout your transition to really kind of invest some time to really deceive and really try to understand all these roles and what's out there and what and I think generally speaking really connecting to people that are doing these kind of jobs and understanding that day to day was really important for me to really understand what's the landscape out there. So I think I can definitely talk to that and really say that yeah, it's very important at the beginning to really understand what's out there. And yeah, today I'm learning a lot about UX research as well, because I didn't have a lot of idea about it, but it's cool to hear.
Plus one to that, I think networking, it was one of the paramount elements when I was beginning to look outside of academia. I did informational interviews with different professionals, so people that worked in policy, people that worked in government, people that worked in tech industries, people that worked at agencies, UX agencies, trying to understand like, what does their day-to-day life look like? What skills do they apply? How do they think about things? Really doing kind of a study of the field that I was considering going into so that I could position and imagine myself there. But yeah, like reaching out to people, doing those informational interviews, using resources like Tori, myself, and others that have taken extra effort to make those available for academics are all things that are there for the picking, and people are very willing to help out because it is a hard thing to do, and it's unfair that there's not more resources.
I'd say for the networking and talking to folks too, it's obviously important to make those connections and hear about opportunities, but the more you do that, the more practice you get talking about yourself, refining your 10-second intro of what you did. I literally pre-wrote my 1-sentence explanation of who I was and what I wanted to do, my minute version, and then like my 5-minute version of points that I want to hit, things that I want to say, because that's when you can make sure you get in all of those key terms and phrases and all of those, the way that I, translated what project management skills I had, all of those things that I didn't know I had as a PhD. So these are things that you can pre-write and pre-practice. And the more you talk to folks, the more comfortable you get using that jargon, talking about your work in that way.
Can we hear it, Olivia? Can I hear your 1-minute elevator pitch?
Oh, it's been a minute, because I will say it's not having a job than looking for a job. But my general intro is, hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a PhD in linguistics, and my specialization is in conversation analysis. So I studied how do people talk to each other, and I've applied that in how do people talk to technology, and how can we make that experience more seamless.
She's a pro.
It was a lot of practice. I tell you what, the number, like my dog's perking up, that she got these elevator pitches and practices, and I did them to the mirror as well. It's awkward, but it's way less awkward than with other humans. But I'm a linguist. I study language. So of course I was going to approach this, don't to approach this search with your training in mind. Ender is an anthropologist. You're studying the culture. Me as a linguist, I'm studying the terminology. This is why you have these skills.
I think one thing I noticed is also in general, I think one of the benefit in an elevator pitch, or like you mentioned, is what the company or hiring manager may get out of the candidate is important to put as part of the elevator pitch. Because I think even in our resumes as PhDs and academics, we tend to want to show what we can do, and it's a laundry list normally. But I think if it's reframed to like, hey, I can solve XYZ problems for you, then then it's a much shorter list, and probably they're interested in that anyway more than all of the publications or a list of everything else. So having that kind of shift from I did this, that to like I'll solve your X problem is probably really effective.
I presented at this conference. I was in this edited volume. I posted on this blog. I'll put that all in a footnote in like 2-point font so I can still keep it on my one-page resume. Joking, joking.
Hey, as long as you're cramming everything in one page, you know.
Yeah, show of hands, panel. How many of you have a one-page resume? No, Mateo's is longer. Okay, so
I got two.
well, and what I say on that one is, folks, think about the role you're looking at and what they expect. Like Aditya was just saying, if you can know your hiring manager, what they want, what they expect, then you can tailor with what you need.
And just to kind of
what?
one other point to add, a couple of interesting observations. One is like the more number of years I'm in industry, my resume gets shorter. I don't know how that worked, but I think that's something that has happened in my resume. It becomes cleaner and shorter.
Same.
And so, you know, when I applied my first role, I remember a very long, like, you know, 2 to 3 pager, and now it's one page with not a lot of, like, fonts are normal size, you know, because I think there's more outcomes you can like, or outcomes that you can just like reference to. So I think that's helpful. And the other thing, going back to what Olivia was saying about networking, one of the biggest benefits is if you start targeting 4 or 5 companies, networking not only helps you like practice your pitch, but also get more insights about the company, which you will increases your probability of getting your offer in your interviews, because you sound more knowledgeable about the company and their products, and that comes through networking as well.
Well, and so I think what folks are hearing here is that these processes, the learning these abilities to figure out how to network your way in, figure out how to market your skills, it's a process that you keep learning throughout your career. And it's challenging, but I think you're hearing from folks on the panel, you've got a lot of folks and resources who are willing to help, right? So this is not necessarily easy, but there are resources for you to be able to make progress in these areas. So I want to start to wrap us up because we're at 2 till. And so we can share some of those resources I was talking about. Before I do, thank you to panelists. Let's put little thumbs up or celebrations for the attendees. Thanks, panelists, for making time. I know each of you has a lot going on in your days, and so I appreciate that you make the time to come here and share your experience with PhDs so that they see opportunities available for them. Attendees, I will also thank you. You just made the time. You just made an hour to think about your career, to think about what's possible. And so that's beginning to spark areas of opportunity for you from having made that time. So I see folks exchanging in the chat some follow-up details, but I'll pause here for the panel. Anything you want to share with attendees as ways that they can follow up?
Yeah, I put in the chat our resources of Academia to UX, which is honestly like as comprehensive as we can make it, including portfolios, one-page resumes, translating skills, how to talk to hiring managers, etc. So please do take advantage of that, and feel free to email if you have any further on questions. I've also provided that in there. And also, Tori, thank you so much for hosting this and seeing some of these questions that were coming in. It's been really emotionally touching for me to feel like we're getting somewhere with this. Yeah.
The graphs are moving. The numbers are changing.
It's green and it's going up.
Aditya, did you have things you wanted to share here?
Yeah, so I have a couple of links there where, I started talking to some grad students, and I have a toddler and a full-time role. So at some point I couldn't. So I started writing everything online, and I just posted that link, resources for people who can just take it from there. And happy to connect more on LinkedIn. I may not be able to meet everybody because I have a toddler who decides my entire day schedule. But other than that, we can always connect more. So thank you for having me. And yeah, thank you for hosting this.
Awesome. Well, I will drop in as well. So I also have created resources for folks to navigate this. I'll drop those in chat. I have a 30% discount that I'm giving to folks who attended this because I know you're already interested. That's good through the end of the day tomorrow. So I'll drop in the link there on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll drop this in the chat of YouTube or in the description on YouTube afterwards. But just for folks, if you want to leverage that playbook or a strategy call with me, that's a discount link for 30% off if you use that before tomorrow, because I know folks attending this panel have actually taken an hour to commit to their development. And so happy to help follow up if need be. Grateful to the panelists for making time to share their thoughts, expertise, resources, journey with all of us. Thank you to attendees. I hope that each of you finds success in your career, whatever that looks like for you, right? That you find fulfillment in defining what fulfilling work looks like for you. Excited for each of you on that journey and hope that you found some inspiration and opportunity from today's panel. Thanks so much for joining, folks. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye.